Ah, Assassin's Creed, my old flame. I was but a youthful cherub when these games were first coming out, and I have vivid memories of watching my dad play through them, hoping that one day I could actually play them. And with the passing of time, I did, so much so it became a monumental part of my childhood. This series got me into history, made me look at the world in a different way, and universally made people think that parkour was a cool thing to do. Parkour, of course, originating from the French words for joint pain and concussion. This series altered my brain chemistry and used to be my favorite of all time, bar none. And now, well, now I'm doing a video on it. And man, is there more to this series than I initially thought. I was so naive when writing this script at first. Oh, I'll just go through a little bit of each game, it'll be easy. But I soon realized that would be a fool's dream, as the first draft of this script ran up to 4,000 words before I even got past Black Flag. So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna group these games up so as to allow my mental sanity to remain at least partially intact. Be sure to let us know in the comments if you want me to suffer and release the full 2-hour version of this script. At least I think it might be 2 hours, it might be longer, oh my god. This story begins, like so many do, in Canada. And in this far off and distant land, we find ourselves in a little game development studio called Ubisoft Montreal. A subsidiary of the French company Ubisoft, who you might know as the ones who brought you Naruto Rise of a Ninja, believe it. But a series you might have forgotten about is the Prince of Persia series, which Ubisoft is also responsible for. Mind you, that's both the series existing and you forgetting about it. Following 2003's Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Ubisoft was looking for the next entry in the series. More specifically, game director Patrice Desilets, producer Jade Raymond, and writer Corey May. The team had come up with the idea of an open-world Prince of Persia game, and one that would have a character beyond the titular prince. They also wanted to add larger spaces and crowds into the game, and narratively wanted to change up how the prince is presented. Research into Persian history would then uncover the novel Alamut by Slovenian writer Vladimir Bartol, which discusses the historical Hashishin sect of Ismaili, which itself is a sect of Shia Islam. The team was then inspired by this discovery to explore a story in which the player controlled an assassin tasked with protecting the prince. However, Ubisoft didn't love the idea of a Prince of Persia game where players didn't control a prince, but the premise was definitely solid. As such, the marketing team would push the development team to create a brand new IP under the name Just Dance Assassin's Creed. This would cause the team to lead into the historical fiction angle, with the Order of Assassins fighting against the Knights Templar during the Third Crusade. And on November 13th, 2007, the first Assassin's Creed game was released. Now, Assassin's Creed 1 isn't anything much to talk about, unfortunately. Altair is an interesting character, however, not as much in this game. A lot of Altair's characterization comes from external material, spin-offs, or later games in the series. Not to say he doesn't have his fans though, I mean I'm one of them, I wouldn't have a shirt of him if I didn't like him.
You like Assassin's Creed?
The gameplay is also fine, but lacks a lot of polish. The climbing is slow, the combat is slow, assassinations can only happen in one specific way, and you can't swim so it's not perfect, but I would be lying if I said that this was a bad game. The first game acts more as a foundation for what the series could be, rather than an excellent game in and of itself. But then, we get to the Ezio trilogy. Assassin's Creed 2 released in 2009 and for many defined what Assassin's Creed could be. It introduced tons of unique side quests, vastly improved the combat and movement, and introduced the character that would become synonymous with the entire franchise. Ezio Auditore da Firenze, voiced by the one and only Roger Craig Smith, would become an icon of not only Assassin's Creed, but of gaming. Ezio, or at least his outfit, would make his way into PlayStation commercials, Little Big Planets 1 and 2, and Soul Calibur 5. Oh yeah, and Fortnite. He's in Fortnite too. Ezio hasn't been in an Assassin's Creed game since 2011, and over a decade later is still showing up in other material. Back to Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood and Revelations would release in 2010 and 2011 respectively. These two games would wrap up Ezio's and Altair's stories and reinforce the theme of working together to face down tyranny through recruiting citizens to be assassins. They also introduced multiplayer, which I never actually got to play, but looked like a really fun time. If Ubisoft ever wants to bring this back, that would be great, thanks. I will gladly waste all my money on that. Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood were universally praised, with Revelations falling off a bit. The game is still great, mind you, but every amazing creation casts a long shadow. Why do you think we haven't gotten Elder Scrolls 6 yet? But Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 would bring some more success to the series, with AC4 Black Flag sitting as the third highest rated Assassin's Creed game behind 2 and Brotherhood. These games started to go a little bit more in depth with the open world concepts of the series. Assassin's Creed Revelations had introduced crafting, but only for the added bomb mechanic. In 3 and 4, now certain upgrades were tied to the crafting system as opposed to just purchasing them with in-game currency. This is fine in theory and in practice isn't too obnoxious, but the move in this direction is the part that sparks worry. It felt more and more like the series was moving towards open world RPG and leaving its stealth action roots in the dust. However, I still have a lot of fun with Black Flag, and I need to spend more time with 3 before making a concrete negative decision on it. Tied to these games were Assassin's Creed Liberation and Freedom Cry. Both of these were not super well received, but Liberation was originally a PSP title that was very limited and sped through a lot of its story, so at least that makes sense, and Freedom Cry actually did pretty well, all things considered. And Assassin's Creed Rogue has the feel of a DLC to Black Flag and AC3 since it ties both of them together. Not in a bad way though, I actually think it does a decent job of incorporating the mechanics of 4 and putting them in a setting closer to 3. Also, I live in upstate New York, so it's actually kind of cool to visit Albany, which is the first time anyone's ever said it's cool to visit Albany. Then Assassin's Creed Unity and Syndicate came out in 2014 and 2015 respectively, and introduced a new parkour system that I actually like quite a lot. I think allowing the player to have more control when it comes to their movement in a game like this is a welcome sight, especially since these two games unfortunately dropped the ball in a lot of other aspects. The combat certainly took a toll on this, since they decided to introduce leveled enemies. At this point in the series, the RPG mechanics were starting to get a little too comfortable, and in my opinion, these were the last games that really held on to their stealth action roots. Honorable mention for the DLC weapon in AC Unity, which somehow does more damage than the actual piece of Eden's sword that was the entire purpose of the original game's story. Yeah, it doesn't do as much as this weapon apparently. Why? Then the Chronicles games released over the course of 2015 and 2016. These games, ironically, harken back to the series' roots as a Prince of Persia game with 2D stealth platforming. Unfortunately, Ubisoft Montreal has decided to not make more of these, which is a shame since they'd be a great way to add variety to the series. Oh yeah, and in 2016 a whole ass Assassin's Creed movie came out starring Michael Fassbender. I didn't remember watching this movie when it first came out, but allow me to tell you my initial thoughts. Why is the Animus a big grabby hand? Why didn't they focus this movie around any of the pre-existing characters in their canon instead of a completely new one fans didn't have any attachment to? Why are they making a movie out of Assassin's Creed if they aren't going to do their homework to make it good? Also, it takes place during the Spanish Inquisition, which I didn't expect.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
And unfortunately, it's another example of a video game movie adaptation tripping and falling over itself before even getting to the start line. The movie would barely make back its budget and had several sequels that would be chucked into the scrap heap. I guess I'll have to go to YouTube and watch some of the unique and well-made fan films that actually do the source material justice despite having a way smaller budget than this major motion picture. Oh well. In 2017, we would get Assassin's Creed Origins, and from here the series would completely lose itself. From here, the games would completely focus on RPG elements, with stealth gameplay being sat in the back of the class. Now all of your weapons, including your hidden blade, have rarity. Yeah, that assassination technique that was a one-shot kill on every enemy in the previous games. Now enemies can just shrug it off if the blade isn't upgraded enough. And while some enemies are no problem, if you don't have a weapon that does enough damage, you might as well be hitting them with a pool noodle. It takes what was an okay system in previous titles, that being the weapon and equipment upgrades, and makes them the star of the show. Not to mention, so many of the Templars or Order members are just flat characters in a mask that pop up just before getting the old stabby stab. I would mention the historical inaccuracies, but to some degree I can accept them, if only because it feels like if they're going to do this route, they might as well put cool stuff in there, I guess. As much as I would love to get into these games more, they mark a depressing trend not just in the series, not just at Ubisoft, but the entire gaming industry. This marked an era of complacency. The games didn't have to be great if they could just be good enough. If the games just boil down to a generic RPG in a semi-interesting time period, then why should anyone buy and play these games? These games were changing, but not improving, getting bigger, but not innovating. Perfectly fine to skate on by doing the bare minimum, which flows perfectly into the current state of Ubisoft and the series. Assassin's Creed Shadows was meant to be released in November of 2024, but was pushed back to 2025. Why is that? Because everyone else realized what I mentioned in the last section. Star Wars Outlaws, Skull and Bones, Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, all of these were meant to be huge hits for Ubisoft, but they weren't. Because like Assassin's Creed, they were afflicted with the same problem. The games were good, sure, but were they spend $70 good? Games are getting more expensive and fans want something that will be worth the money. And they don't want to spend their hard-earned cash on a game that will just be okay. Think of some of the most praised games in the last few years. Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, even Balatro. These games offer something at least new, fresh, and well-made. Baldur's Gate 3 went through tons of early access and careful tweaking before releasing, and it was a huge success. Elden Ring was developed by From Software, who are known for quality and also spent a lot of time making it the best it could be. Despite being an indie game, Balatro manages to offer hundreds of hours of content with free DLC and a sub-AAA price. And Assassin's Creed just doesn't have any of that. Ubisoft has been falling into the same formula for what feels like every single game they put out, and fans are taking notice. The games are expensive, don't feel substantial, and are prone to glitches, so why would someone shell out the money to play it? There's hope that Ubisoft learns from this failure since they delayed Shadows and their stock hit a 10-year low in 2024, but I'm not holding my breath. The delay feels like putting a band-aid on a cannon wound, and I doubt any true change will come without a radical shakeup. Despite the series' ups and downs, it did become a huge part of video game culture. Altair is in Smash Bros. He has canonically met Mario. Wait, does that mean Mario's a Templar? What questions this game makes you ask? Not to mention, this series got the YouTube treatment of a game theory video, some parody music videos, and as previously mentioned, people doing sick flips and hoods. I can only imagine the amount of people who tried this only to come to a stark realization about back pain. Also, the amount of spin-offs that came from this series is crazy. They had card games, board games, an entire book series, orchestra performances, and digital museum tours. Assassin's Creed Discovery Tours are an interesting educational tool that takes players into different ancient worlds. As of now, they only have Egypt, the Viking Age, and ancient Greece, but I'm sure more are on the way with future releases, although they didn't come out with one alongside Mirage, so I don't know. They also had a VR game, but there really isn't much to talk about here, so I didn't include it in the history section. It felt like I should at least mention it though, since more series are doing VR, which is cool and all, but I wear glasses, meaning VR headsets and I have a bad relationship. And perhaps the craziest thing this series has ever done, helping to restore Notre Dame. In 2019, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris caught on fire, and since it was a nearly 1,000-year-old building, there wasn't much documentation to aid in restoring it. Except for, strangely enough, Assassin's Creed Unity, which painstakingly recreated the cathedral digitally. The game would then be used to help map out and restore Notre Dame, which made a recovery nearly 5.5 years later. For being such an integral part of the rebuilding efforts, Assassin's Creed was included in the opening ceremonies of the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. This entire story is a fantastic example of how video games can transcend just being entertainment and have a tangible, positive impact on the world. It's also the second coolest thing to happen during that ceremony because the French metal band Gojira opened the festivities with a headless Marie Antoinette. Sorry, Assassin's Creed, you're not beating that. And here we are, once again in the year it currently is. This makes the second video now that I've discussed a game from my childhood, and boy howdy is it more depressing than going over Minecraft. Assassin's Creed is a case study for how big game companies will water down what makes it successful and rest on their laurels. Unfortunately, that often leads to ruin as fans start asking what else the games can offer them, and once they look past the gilded exterior, they find it's just a hollow shell. Evolution is what strengthens game companies and makes their products all the better for it. Part of me hopes that Ubisoft will learn the error of their ways and course correct to make an Assassin's Creed game I wouldn't mind playing. Thanks for watching. Are you a fan of Assassin's Creed? Did you drop off the series like I did? What do you think Ubisoft should do to amend their issues? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.